Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the Daily Debate. My name is Ahmed Nader and tonight we're going to focus on a very important and significant topic for the future of Egypt within the African continent. The African-Egyptian bilateral ties, or the Egyptian-African bilateral ties, as we have seen over the past couple of days. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi receiving the President of Gabon, Brice Nguema, and today we have seen the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Egyptian Expatriates Affairs, Badr Abdel receiving the Foreign Minister of Mali, Abdullah Diop, today. And we have seen, as I mentioned, over the past couple of days, strengthening of the bilateral relations between Egypt and Gabon and Egypt and Mali. Today, on the diplomatic, the economic and the cultural levels as well. We will be starting straight away with the main top stories for tonight, and they come through the presidential activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who extended sincere congratulations to Mr. Antonio Costa on the occasion of assuming the presidency of the European Council. President al-Sisi expressed his hope to strengthen the close relations between Egypt and the European Union and to intensify the joint work and coordination on the issues of regional security and stability, as well as addressing the ongoing conflicts. The other top story for today comes through the topic of the daily debate for tonight, the Egyptian-African relations. As I mentioned in the beginning, that the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Badr Abdel received the Foreign Minister of Mali, Abdullah Diop. As the Minister of Foreign, Migration and the Egyptian Expatriates Affairs, Badr Abdel asserted the Egyptian full readiness to offer its expertise in fighting terrorism to Mali. Addressing a joint press conference with the visiting Malian Foreign Minister Abdullah Diop in Cairo on Sunday, the Minister said through cooperation between the Defense and the Interior Ministries in both Egypt and Mali, the two countries would facilitate such expertise exchange. Abdel asserted President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's support for Africa, adding that both sides agreed on enhancing bilateral ties as well as trade and economic cooperation. The top diplomat said that Egypt is following up on the developments in Syria with great concern, adding that Egypt is always in support of the state institutions. For his part, the Malian Foreign Minister Abdullah Diop hailed the Egyptian great role and extensive efforts to find peaceful solutions to the crises and problems, notably in the Middle East and Africa. He also praised the Egyptian support to Mali during the transitional period. And we will be heading to a very significant report detailing the visits and the activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi over the past week, all in the upcoming report. Stay tuned.
President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi is briefed during the meeting on the government's action plan to ensure the provision of petroleum products needed for the electricity sector. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi reviews the positive indicators related to the banking sector, monetary policy and the exchange rate. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi met with the heads of several major international companies operating in the industrial sector for participating in the third edition of the annual International Forum and Exhibition for Industries. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received Mr. Andrew Parsons, President of the International Paralympic Committee. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received King Abdullah II bin al-Hussein of Jordan, where the two sides held a discussion session with the participation of delegations from both countries. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdul Rahman al-Thani, the Prime Minister and Minister of Foreign Affairs of Qatar, along with his accompanying delegation. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi sent a message to the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas on the occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people, expressing Egypt's unwavering solidarity with the Palestinians amidst the ongoing crisis, particularly the humanitarian tragedy in Gaza due to the Israeli aggression. Through his Facebook page, President al-Sisi affirmed his full support for the legitimate rights of the Palestinian people on the occasion of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi received the President of Gabon, Brice Nguema, at the Presidential Palace in Ittihadiyya. An official reception was held and a press conference was held after their meeting.
And from the last item of presidency in a week, where we brought you the latest activities of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi over the past week. In the past report, we will be heading to the first report of the daily debate for tonight, focusing on the visit by the President of Gabon and the press conference that was held between President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi and his counterpart from Gabon, the President Brice Nguema, as they focused on strengthening cooperation between Egypt and Gabon in the fields of trade, exchange and the infrastructure projects. We'll be having more details in the upcoming reports, so stay tuned.
President Fattah al-Sisi and his Gabonese counterpart, President Brice Nguema, held joint press conference in Cairo on Saturday. President al-Sisi stated that he and the Gabonese transitional President Brice Nguema have concurred on prioritizing the execution of infrastructure projects in Gabon. In that press conference, following their discussions, al-Sisi said they agreed that these projects would encompass construction of new roads and implementation of projects in electricity and sanitation aimed at fostering development in Gabon. For his part, the Gabonese president congratulated President al-Sisi on the construction of the new administrative capital and expressed his aspiration to accomplish something similar in his country. Furthermore, the two leaders emphasized the importance of enhancing trade exchange and strengthening relations between the private sectors of Egypt and Gabon. They agreed to strengthen Egypt's support for Gabon in the health sector and creation of opportunities for the use of Egyptian medicine in the Gabonese market. Additionally, they emphasized the importance of enhancing joint cooperation in agriculture, renewable energy, industry, transportation, and in the capacity building of Gabonese cadres. Meanwhile, President al-Sisi congratulated President Nguema on successfully completing the referendum on the new Gabonese constitution, which represents a milestone towards completion of the transitional process in the coming months. Gabon is undergoing a successful peaceful transition process to achieve aspirations of its people for democracy and change. This process is being followed and appreciated by various regional and international parties. He stressed Egypt's support for Gabon and its readiness to provide all support to ensure success of transitional phase. The two leaders agreed on the importance of continuing consultation and coordination on these issues so as to ensure achieving peace and security in Africa. Nguema stated that they are working on enhancing relations with Egypt at all levels, inviting Egyptian companies to invest in Gabon across various sectors.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight Ambassador Medhat Miligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and the member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much for being with us tonight, Mr. Ambassador.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. Of course, we did see yesterday the reception of His Excellency President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi for his counterpart from Gabon, Brice Nguema. How do you see the significance and the importance of such a visit by the President of Gabon to Egypt at this specific timing?
Well, first of all, if we want to talk in general, I mean, President Sisi, ever since he took power in 2013, and one of his primary focus was the African continent and to regain the historical relations that we had with all the African countries. And if you remember, he made several visits to various African countries, whether we're talking about the West or the center or south of the continent.
Yes.
I think that the last visit of President Sisi to Gabon was in 2017, when he was received by the former president of Gabon, Mr. Bongo. Well, I think that the visit is very important. It marks a landmine in the relations with the region of Central Africa. Gabon is one of the key countries, along with Cameroon and Central African Republic, who are keys of this area of Central Africa. And I believe that it has a lot of political and economical indication that we're going to see along the show tonight about what are exactly the horizons of the cooperation that could happen between Egypt and Gabon.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, we have seen ever since President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi took office in 2014, one of the main priorities in terms of the political leadership outside of Egypt is to be strengthening the bilateral ties between Egypt and Africa once again, but more specifically on the economic front, the economic cooperation between Egypt and the African continent. How do you see the importance and the success that we have had over the past decade in this field?
I think we have reached several goals of what we wanted to do. Of course, there is a lot to be done, and but the infiltration of Egypt in various African countries is already remarked and is already seen, and it's already well received by the African country. As an ambassador who was, I mean, my last post, I was ambassador to one of the Central African Republic. Precisely, I was ambassador to Cameroon and Central African Republic.
Yes.
I can say that Egypt is giving much attention to this area, and I believe that there is a lot of things to be done in this area specifically. I mean, this area is very rich in various raw materials that we need, and these countries actually import a lot of their needs from the outside world, and I believe that the Egyptian share should be more than what it is right now. We are doing our best, we are doing our utmost effort to double the numbers and even to triple them if possible. But of course we need to work a little bit more. I think that the private sector, especially in Egypt, need to be more interested in Africa in general.
Yes.
And if the President of the Republic is paving the way as the state to foster relations and friendly relations with African countries, then the relay should be taken from the private sector and foster more on these relations to enhance the life of the Africans and as well as of Egyptians. Let's not forget the motto that we always use, which is the win-win relationship.
Yes.
And in this situation, I mean, we have a lot of technologies that we are mastering that we could help the African with, and on the other hand, also the Africans have a lot to offer to Egypt, whether we're talking about raw material or even political support in various international organizations such as the United Nations and elsewhere.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned the private sector and the importance of engaging the private sector here in Egypt, first of all, over the past decade under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, in terms of having the private sector as a partner of success, not just in the fields of infrastructure, but in the fields of health, for example, the fields of education, for example, as well. Do you think that we have succeeded in engaging the private sector here in the country so as to be giving them a better chance of being engaged in Africa, in the African continent, of going to other countries, into the depth of Africa and having more success for the motto that you have said, a win-win situation for Egypt, for Africans, for the private sector?
Well, I think the private sector is not very much engaged until this point.
Yes.
However, what I want to mention that in the last years we've seen a lot of governmental engagement. But this is due to the nature of the projects that we were undertaking. I mean, we were talking about infrastructure projects and infrastructure needs, whether we are talking about Egypt or even if we are helping other African countries with this. And these are usually projects that the private sector is reluctant to deal with. I mean, if we are talking, for instance, about the new power plant that is built in Tanzania, for instance.
Yes.
This power plant, although it's constructed by one of the biggest private companies, which is the Arab Contractors.
Julius Nyerere.
Exactly,
Yes.
that's the one. But, of course, with the support of the government, the Egyptian government and the Tanzanese government. Why? Because these are heavy projects and they need a lot of capitals to be invested, and these are the job of states and not private sector. So the Egyptian government, when I'm talking here, I'm talking about internally in Egypt.
Yes.
The last few years we've been talking that the government is overtaking projects from the private sector, but this was not true. Actually, the government needed to pave the way to the private sector at a later stage to arrive after preparing the set for its arrival, because you need to prepare your infrastructure correctly in order to attract investment and to attract private sector to work on this. So the past phase was a phase that is designated mainly to the governmental sector,
yes,
while the next phase is going to be the private sector. And we, after what we've done, the reforms, the economical reforms that were undertaken by the Egyptian government, now it's the turn for the private sector to play its role into going into more detailed projects that are in need for the Egyptian economy and for African economies as well.
So we should be expecting more engagement by the private sector
Definitely.
here in the country for the
Definitely.
upcoming decade.
Definitely. I mean, this is the time. I mean, the government has done its job by, as I said, paving the way for
Yes.
the private sector, and now it's the role of the private sector to take the baton and continue the race towards a better life and better lifestyle for Egyptians and Africans as well.
But on a bigger scale, on a continental scale, in Africa, do you think that there is a lot to be done in terms of infrastructure and artificial intelligence and technology for the African countries to be making it more lucrative and more attractive for the private sector, for the entrepreneurs to be going into Africa and investing for the benefit of the countries, for the citizens, for the private sector as well?
Well, in Africa we're still witnessing a transitional period. I mean, Africa was always known for exporting raw materials for the West in general. And this policy, although it's not a bad one to provide the country with its basic needs of food and energy and other demands, but usually the price is decided up north more than it's decided in the south, in the countries that produces the raw material. We've seen many examples about the prices of some of the products and how cheap it is when you get it in Africa and how expensive when you sell it in Europe, which shows that all these benefits were put in the pockets of the West in general. So now we have a transitional period that the African countries do not want just to be a seller of raw material. They want to have an added value to this. As an example, I will give an example to something I have seen, and maybe later on the show we'll discuss about it,
yes,
which is the wood production in Central Africa, and especially in Gabon. If I may add, I received His Excellency Dr. Hisham Tawfiq, who was the Minister of Public Affairs during the last government. And he came specifically to Cameroon and to Gabon in order to seek the possibility of opening a wood factory there to provide Egypt and maybe also export to other countries wooden products. When I looked at the idea and when I discussed it with the local authorities there, I found that the price of wood, and they used to sell wood as trunks of trees, just as it is. I mean, they don't make any additional value to it.
Yes.
So let's say this would cost 1 unit of whatever the currency we are going to use. But if you will just split it in two, or make bars, or make even sheets, or any kind of very simple production, at least value. This will be 10 times more.
10 times.
This is calculated. It's not just a speculation.
Yes.
A speculated number. No, this is the reality of things, and that's why we said that this is going to be a win-win situation. We are going to help to open a big wood factory. We are going to hire locals to work at this factory, and accordingly we are going to build capacity within the African nations, and at the same time we are going to get our wood that we need here in Damietta, as it is one of the greatest wood craftspeople, and we are going to get it like 10 times cheaper than what we used to get from Europe in type of wood. So far there are some bureaucratic things, so the project did not take off yet, but it is in the pipeline, and we are going to do factories, whether we are talking about Cameroon or in Gabon, and maybe this is one of the issues we discussed. That's what I want to say, that when Gabon used to sell its wood as logs of wood,
yes,
it doesn't have any value compared for any transformational work made on this wood. It's going to be, as I said, at least 10 times more, even more. It depends on the kind of work you do it on the wood. So this is an example that I want to give. But if we are going to talk about Gabon and the visit, I think there is also a very important factor, which is a political factor. As we all know, Gabon, ever since the coup that took place in the country, and Gabon membership to the EU is suspended. And I think we also were misunderstood at a certain point,
yes,
and Egypt's membership at the EU also was suspended for a certain short period of time.
Can we help Gabon to be reactivating the membership?
Of course, and I believe this is one of the reasons of the visit, is to seek Egypt's help with its weight in the African Union, with its weight in its society, in the African society, to convince that things have been going on smooth, and this change of regime was approved by the people. I mean, we do not hear about demonstrations or any problems in Gabon because of this change of power. On the contrary, people have welcomed it after a long reign of the Bongo family. So now it is time for a new blood into the country, and I believe the people are satisfied. What's left is that the African Union recognize this transition as a peaceful one, and accordingly restore Gabon's place into the African Union.
Yes, Mr. Ambassador, one term that was used heavily yesterday by President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi alongside the President of Gabon, and today as well by the Foreign Minister Badr Abdulati alongside the Foreign Minister of Mali for today, is to be exporting expertise from Egypt into Africa, into Gabon, into Mali. How do you see the importance, more specifically in the fields of infrastructure and health, because we have excelled in those two fields over the past decade under the tenure of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi? Do you think that we can be exporting more expertise in those fields? You've mentioned the dam in Tanzania, Julius Nyerere, and we have seen over the past 4 or 5 years the aid that was given by Egypt to Africa and to several countries during the coronavirus pandemic, for example, by the Virus C campaign, the initiative, the presidential initiative that was launched here in Egypt. It was propagated as well into Africa. How important is to be exporting expertise, and can we do it even more in the future?
Well, I will tell you something. I mean, we have a policy, and this policy was even enhanced and elaborated on during the tenure of President Sisi,
Yes.
which is the African Fund and African Fund to help African countries. And this is a department at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs mainly directed to actually receive their cadres in Egypt in order to train them in various things. I mean,
yes.
you name it, actually. I mean, Egypt is spending a fortune on this, and we are, I mean, really happy that we could help. The idea, of course, of sending experts is a little bit very costly.
Yes.
I hope we can do it. But
so it's easier and less costly to be training the cadres of Gabon and Mali?
Because you receive a certain number of them and you make one training course. Of course, they stay in our facilities here, which is, of course, easier to manage. I mean, when it comes to hotels and all kind of accommodations here. And then you train the trainers, as we can say it. I mean, once you train those people, they go back to their country and train their own people. But when you send an expert, that means that you have to pay him his salary, and you have to give him also allocation for housing and for food, and of course, not to mention that there is a lot of disease that, like malaria and things that actually they have to be protected from. I mean, there is a lot of problems related to this. Nevertheless, we do it. I mean, I personally did it in Cameroon, when I asked for an expert in the field of fishery, and because actually Cameroon is a country that is known for its richness in seafood in general.
Yes.
But at the same time they don't have the capacity to enlarge this. That's why still prices of fish and seafood is quite expensive. So the idea is that in a very small piece of land, let's say, I mean, around 2 square meter by 2 square meter, any farmer could raise in his own farm a small tank where he could raise fish, sweetwater fish, and doesn't require a lot of capacity or a lot of resources, and it can be done. And actually we did this with the participation of around 200 persons who took this course from the Egyptian expert, who came for 3 months and then renewed to another 3 months. And actually the result was astonishing, I mean, and really very good, because we had for the first time farmers who are not accustomed to eating fish, and they're raising fish in their own farms in a very small yard, and at the same time they can either sell those fish or even exchange it with other goods that they need, and not to mention to introduce a new source of protein for farmers who are not used to fish and so on. So of course there is plenty of projects that could be done in collaboration with African countries. The most important thing is not just to rely on the projects and on the training courses that we are doing here in Egypt, but also to tailor some of the programs according to the African countries' needs. And we've done this. I mean, sometimes they do ask for specific courses in the field of police work, or in the field even army, like artillery and elsewhere. And we do this, we help them, and they stay here at the police academy, at the military academy, and they get to be trained. So we do all kind of training for those things, and that's, I think, answers your question about the collaboration in the field of building capacity. And this is one of the most important fields that we are engaged in.
Fields that can benefit them once again when they return home. Ambassador Medhat Miligy, allow me to be going to the other report of the daily debate for tonight, focusing on the Egyptian request to be restructuring the African Peace and Security Council for a fairer representation for North Africa after having only 2 seats on the board. We will be having more details in the upcoming reports, so stay tuned.
Minister of Foreign Affairs Badr Abdulati emphasized the importance of restructuring the African Union's Peace and Security Council (PSC) to ensure fair representation for North Africa, highlighting the region's historic contribution to the African continent's independence. The Egyptian Foreign Minister expressed hopes that the PSC's protocol would be amended to grant North African region an additional seat to ensure a more balanced representation. Abdelati's remarks came during a virtual Ministerial Council meeting which focused on discussing experiences and lessons learned from implementing the PSC's mandate under the African Union's Constitutive Act and protocol that established it. In October, Egypt took over the leadership of the AU's PSC during a period marked by rising regional and global complexities and escalating security issues. The PSC is the AU's primary decision-making body responsible for preventing, managing and resolving conflicts. It also plays a crucial role in implementing measures to combat international terrorism. The Council consists of 15 non-permanent members elected by the AU Executive Council. According to the Council's official website, 10 members serve 2-year terms while 5 serve 5-year terms. North Africa, including Egypt, Algeria, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, Tunisia and Western Sahara, currently holds just 2 seats on the PSC. West Africa has 4 seats and Southern, Central and East Africa each have 3 seats. During the ministerial meeting, Abdelati emphasized that Africa is currently facing unprecedented challenges that undermine its ability to achieve the 2063 agenda goals. The EU Agenda 2063 is a strategic framework for achieving inclusive and sustainable development across Africa over the next 50 years. Its focus is on promoting economic growth, social progress, peace, security and regional integration. Egypt's top diplomats stressed the importance of adhering to AU's core principles, including respect for state sovereignty, territorial integrity and non-interference in their internal affairs. He also reaffirmed Egypt's steadfast commitment to promoting peace, security and development across Africa. Moreover, Abdelati discussed effectiveness of the PSC's mechanisms in addressing Africa's security challenges, highlighting the increasing trend of suspending countries' memberships within the AU. He explained that sanctions may not always be effective in resolving crises and could sometimes exacerbate violence. Abdelati also called for adoption of more constructive strategies to strengthen national institutions and support African countries during transitional periods. Additionally, he stressed the need to enhance the EU's capacity to respond effectively to crises and support post-conflict peace building and development to achieve lasting stability.
Welcome back. You're still watching the Daily Debate, and I'm honored to be having with me over the program for tonight Ambassador Medhat Miligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and the member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. Thank you very much once again for being with us tonight. We have seen over the past report a request by Egypt to be restructuring the African Peace and Security Council, to be having more than 2 seats for North Africa, as we did hear during the report that North Africa comprises a lot of countries, including Algeria, Morocco, Mauritania, Egypt, and etc. How do you see this request, especially with this momentum that we have seen over the past couple of days by the visits of the Foreign Minister of Mali today and the President of Gabon yesterday?
Exactly. Well, Egypt is seeking a more just representation of North Africa in the Peace and Security Council. However, we have also to understand that the number of Arab states, which are the northern African countries, I think there are 6 countries or 7 countries, including Mauritania. And when we are talking about South and West and East Africa, there are a larger number than those 7 countries. And
yes,
maybe that's why the reason. However, since we are talking geographically and not by country, so Egypt is entitled to request an additional seat at least to be equal to other geographical areas, to be at least 3 seats instead of the current 2 seats that we are occupying. However, this will not hinder Egypt from doing the work it should be doing, since it's assuming the presidency this year for this very important dossier and very important department within the African Union. Let's not forget that we have around 6 countries that are suspended right now. Their membership is suspended due to coup or changing of power. unconstitutional changing of power, and that's why we have 6 African countries right now that were suspended, and I think this will require a lot of work to bring them back home to the African Union. I believe that Egypt is going to seize the opportunity of being the president of this council in order to reach the 3rd seat that we are looking for, and I don't think it will change the power of or the structure of the council, since we are going to talk about equal rights and that the minimum number of seats is going to be 3, although we have one area, I believe it's the south or the west, if I'm not mistaken, that has 4 seats currently. So 3 is the minimum, and North Africa should not be less than 3 at least.
Mr. Ambassador, of course, we know that Africa has a lot of disputes within it, a lot of conflicts, a lot of armed conflicts, and as you mentioned, how do you see the role of Egypt being a mediator in terms of the African level and the regional level, like, for example, the aggression by the Israeli forces against Gaza, for example, over the past year and a couple of months, or a year and a month? How do you see the role of Egypt as a mediator, both regionally and continentally?
Well, Egypt have always been known as an impartial part in any conflict that is taking place in Africa. That's why it has been requested to help many African countries from the leaders of the same country to mediate between those countries. It's a country that is considered a pillar of the African Union, a pillar of the African continent, and at the same time it's a stable country, and it does not project its interior problems on the outside. So accordingly, we are capable more than any other country on the continent to help with this. We don't have any regional dispute with any neighboring country. We are, on the contrary, we are just trying to protect ourselves from the fires coming from neighboring countries,
yes,
such as Libya and Sudan and so forth. So this is why Egypt have always been requested, and this is why the decision of welcoming Egypt as the president of the council was welcomed by all African countries, because they know the role of Egypt and the role that Egypt could play, especially in the light of what you mentioned about the coup and the differences, and not to mention the permanent issue of the Sahel, and which have happened. And as you mentioned, this is why we received periodically visits from Mali, and we also visit Mali because this is one of the key countries that have problems. One more issue that is very important related to Mali, maybe, and other African countries also, which is the desire of the African country, especially the ones that were previously colonized by France, to leave the French orbit and seek a new independent, real independent orbit away from France. The idea that France have military led this country to gain their independence, but it has, and still actually, tied it with a number of treaties and a number of agreements that tie still the economy of these African countries with France, and this is something they want to escape from. Let's not forget that many African countries, I believe around 14 or 15 African countries, have their own currency printed in France, which is causing their economy to be linked directly to the French economy. And there is a lot of other countries that want to take this role and maybe play another role, a little bit more impartial and less influential on these countries, such as Russia and China, who are seeking better positions. And we've seen that many of these African countries who are escaping from the French hegemony are trying to call upon the Russian to help their economy as well. And I believe that the Russian terms are a little bit more beneficial to the African countries than the French one. But of course, no country is going, no developed country is going to be helping African countries without paying the price or receiving the benefits of giving this help. So we have to understand that nobody is coming to help for no reason, just for the sake of help. And here comes the role of Egypt with all its might and what it can do to help the African countries on, as I said, win-win basis. And I think this is the difference. This is why Egypt is welcome everywhere. It's not that we are trying just to absorb their benefits, their resources,
Yes,
without paying back the price for it. On the contrary, we want to evolve it. When we are going to build a wood factory in Africa or in some African countries, this is going to help them as much as it's going to help
speaking
us.
of being, as Egypt, being welcomed anywhere in Africa, and speaking also of disputes and conflicts, we have seen recently the dispute between Ethiopia and Somalia of establishing an Ethiopian port or a port in Somaliland, the breakaway region of Somalia. We have seen recently as well the setting up of a trilateral joint committee between the foreign ministers of Egypt, Eritrea and Somalia for more cooperation and strengthening the trilateral cooperation and coordination between the three countries. How do you see the importance of setting up this committee and the situation between Ethiopia and Somalia and Egypt being as a mediator between both countries?
Well, I think the most important thing they are seeking is to try to hold the unlawful steps taken by Ethiopia. Ethiopia has undermined the security and the integrity and independence of Somalia by breaking a deal with a separatist group, which is Somaliland. Of course, Somaliland, they're happy to get some money from Ethiopia in order to give them, as they said, a base, a naval base on the Red Sea.
It is landlocked.
Exactly.
Ethiopia.
Ethiopia is
There's no ports.
This is a good target. So unfortunately, Ethiopia, in order to achieve its goals of whether we are talking about development or even becoming regional superpowers in the Horn of Africa and all this, instead of doing it the good way by negotiating with the official and legal governments, they are trying to sneak their way around those countries and trying to make an illegal deal with Somaliland, as we've seen. So the idea is to try as much as possible between Egypt, Somalia and Eritrea to contain the Ethiopian threat that represents the actions made by Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, since the step taken by Ethiopia are not the correct step that should be taken. And I believe that although the African Union is based in Addis Ababa, but the African Union should take serious steps against the countries who are breaking the international law in order to achieve personal benefits.
One center that is based here in Cairo is the African Union Center for the Post-Conflict of Reconstruction and Development. How do you see the importance of setting up such a center here in Cairo and the benefits that will return to the African continent by establishing it?
Well, Egypt was always satisfied by working with the bodies that are deriving from the African Union, but also a new phase, which is to try to get some of the regional specialized agencies deriving from the African Union to be based in Egypt. And from here came the necessity of this one, and also the African Union also Administration for Space,
yes,
which is going also to be or already is registered to be in Egypt. So the idea is to have the committees that are quite important for the African to be in Egypt, so we can help it with our experts, we can help it with the logistics that we own, and can help with these departments. This is one of the privileges of having any of the specialized organizations, whether we're talking about, like, for instance, the United Nations Treaty for Nuclear Weapons that is in Vienna, and other places of the, like in The Hague, for instance, the International Court of Justice and so on. So it's always a privilege for any country to host one of the organizations. And I believe that since we are going to be hosting this
Yes.
one, maybe we can help more the African countries to restore peace in the region, and this is one of the main projects that we want to achieve in Africa, and we have spoken about this ever since we took the president in 2019 and 2020.
Yes, a win-win situation, as we
Exactly.
mentioned several times during the course of the episode. Ambassador Medhat Al-Miligy, the former Assistant Foreign Minister and a member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs, thank you very much for being with us tonight on the Daily Debate.
Thank you for having me.
Anytime. And this brings us to the end of the Daily Debate for tonight. I will be seeing you tomorrow. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.